Okay, welcome back to MacNab Chemistry. Today we are going to have a look at recognising primary, secondary and tertiary compounds. Okay, so there are four groups of compounds that we need to be able to identify primary, secondary and tertiary compounds. And they are alcohols, haloalkanes, carbocations and amines. Okay, so here's a table. Okay, I'm going to show you two ways of recognising your primary, secondary and tertiary compounds. Okay, the first way is this, right? Okay, if I take my alcohols here, my primary alcohol, the OH group, so that's my functional group, is attached to a carbon that's attached to one other carbon. Okay, for my secondary alcohol, the OH group is attached to a carbon that's attached to two other carbons. And my tertiary alcohols, the OH group is attached to a carbon that's attached to three other carbons. Okay, haloalkanes then. Functional group Cl in this case. The Cl is attached to a carbon that's attached to one other carbon. The Cl is attached to a carbon for my secondary haloalkanes. So the Cl is attached to a carbon that's attached to two other carbons. For my tertiary haloalkanes, the Cl is attached to a carbon that's attached to three other carbons. Okay, for my carbocations, okay, so there's my positive charge there on that carbon. That carbon, for my primary carbocations, that carbon is attached to one other carbon. This carbon here that's got the positive on it is attached to two other carbons. This carbon here for my tertiary carbocations, okay, so this carbon is attached to three other carbons. Okay, let's go to amines now. So my amine functional group is the NH2 group. For primary amines, that N is attached to one carbon. For secondary amines, the N is attached to two carbons, and for tertiary amines, the N is attached to three carbons. Okay, right, so that's one way of identifying your primary, secondary and tertiary compounds. However, there is another way. Okay, let's look at this and just look at how many hydrogens there are on the group that's next to your functional group. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Right, so for primary alcohols, this carbon is attached to two hydrogens. For primary haloalkanes, this carbon is attached to two hydrogens. For primary carbocations, the carbon that's got the charge on it is attached to two hydrogens. For amines, the N is attached to two hydrogens. That's really quite straightforward. Okay, and it's the same rule for all of them then. Okay, for secondary alcohols, the OH is attached to this carbon, which is attached to H. For haloalkanes, secondary haloalkanes, the Cl is attached to a carbon that's got H on it. For carbocations, the positive is on that carbon, which has got H on it. For amines, for secondary amines, the N is attached to H. Again, it's the same rule for all of them. Okay, but for tertiary alcohols then, the OH group is attached to a carbon that's got no H's on it. For tertiary haloalkanes, the Cl is attached to a carbon with no H's on it. For tertiary carbocations, that's my positive, which is attached to a carbon with no H's on it. Okay, for amines, the N functional group is attached to no H's. Okay, so in summary, if you want a really quick way of doing this, to identify primary compounds, you look at the group next to the functional group. Okay, in the case of alcohols, haloalkanes and carbocations. In the case of amines, you just look at the N. Okay, and so for primary compounds, this species is attached to two H's. For secondary compounds, this species is attached to one H, and for tertiary compounds, the species is attached to no H's. So that species there is attached to no H's. That species there is attached to no H's. That species there is attached to no H's. That species there attached to no H's. Secondary compounds, that species there is attached to H. 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 Okay, primary compounds, that species there is attached to two H's. That species there is attached to two H's. That species there is attached to two H's. And that species there is attached to two H's. I hope that's been helpful, and thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe and click on the bell notification to stay updated.